And thank you for coming to this meeting this afternoon. I'd like to call to order the October 29th, 2025 meeting of the JATCO Redevelopment Advisory Board. Start with item number 1 on the agenda, roll call. Nathan Burkhart.
Here.
Lindsay Bittendorf is an excused absence. Steve Dean.
Here.
Craig DeGarmo.
Here.
Heidi Dedinger. Here. Kristen Dvorak-Stone.
Here.
Aaron Klipstein.
Here.
Jim C. Kuborn.
Here.
James Otterstein.
Here.
And Jeffrey Winchell.
Here.
Okay. All except Lindsay is present. Second item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from the September 24th meeting. You should have received that as an attachment in your packet. I would entertain a motion for approval of the meeting minutes.
So moved.
By James Otterstein. Second?
Second.
By Jim C. Kuborn. Any questions or further discussions on the meeting minutes from last month's meeting? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 10-0, I believe. Okay, old business. There's anything from the last meeting any of the board members would like to discuss? Okay, a couple things I had was, one thing was a takeaway from the tour we did of the site, and thank you for the city for accommodating that. I'm a very visual person, and after visiting the site, I looked a little bit more and thought about it. And kind of just as a perspective for this board to think about what we have ahead of us is that the site from Kellogg up to Delvin Drive is 6,290 feet, and east to west is 220 feet. That's 1.3 miles by 0.4 miles. If you're to walk that site, it would take 30 minutes to walk it from north to south and 10 minutes to walk it from east to west. The area of 250 acres is a big piece of land, and so I kind of decided, how do we break that down into something recognizable? The original mall was 40 acres, so 6 of those would fit on the site. The youth baseball complex is 48 acres, so 5 of those would fit on the site. The fairgrounds, if you kind of double the size it occupies now for parking, is 36 acres. You could fit 7 of those on the site. Parker High School, another thing I think everybody has been to or seen, that's 40 acres, and that would fit 6 on the site. Rockport Pool in Peace Park is 115 acres. You could fit 2 of those on the site. Dollar General is 122 acres. You could fit 2 Dollar Generals on that site. So if you ignore Dollar General, because I don't know if we need any more distribution or not, I don't know if I should say that publicly, and don't think about the parking at the fairgrounds, you could take those first 6 things and fit them all on one site. So that's kind of the scope and scale that we're thinking about on this project as we move forward, would begin to talk about development with the consultant. And from housing, if you think about 4 units per acre, which is not a very dense housing development, that'd be 1,000 households. Janesville's current average person per household is about 2.5. That would be 2,500 new people living in Janesville, which is about 4% of our population. Communities can take 5 to 10 years to increase their population by 4%. So this is truly, as Kevin said in the notes, kind of a historical once in a lifetime type of development to kind of jump down the road with. So anything else from the board? And I did have one question of Kevin, who is not here yet, and I'll direct that to Nick. One thing I meant to bring up at the last meeting was, if we're asked to speak in public at, service club meeting or high school group or something like that, is there a formal policy or procedure on that?
Thank you, Mick. Nick Faust, assistant to the city manager. City Manager Lehner will be joining us here shortly, wrapping up a call that has gone a bit long. I would say that that's a great discussion point for the board, as community interest will probably lead to inquiries for check-ins or civic engagement opportunities. It depends on how the board wishes to handle those as they arise. Right now, I think in the nascent stage of this group's work, things would probably just be an overview of what the board is doing. But as the board begins to work its way through the RFQ process and other steps along the way, you could certainly take a proactive role. I would certainly say that a bit of advice that we give all board, committee, and commission members is that when they're speaking about their work, you always want to represent yourself and not, formally position yourself as a board or speak for the board writ large. But with that, I would also invite the city manager to speak to how the board can go about engagement opportunities as we move forward. Thank you, Mick.
I'm sorry, I was on a phone call and I was one of those folks that you're waiting for them to take a breath to interrupt them to say, I gotta go. And they never took a breath. And so I was trying to wrap up the phone. Could you repeat the question for me that you were asking?
Basically was, the question came up on whether or not or how to approach if we're asked to do a community engagement forum or speaking or present at service club, high school, junior high, something like that, as far as our function here as the redevelopment board.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would just say that that's great to do, and that I would just ask that you coordinate with us on what you're being asked to do, and we can support you in that role. Short straw as a chair, Mick. So, it would probably come through you first, but if there's other individual members, we can send groups to different functions. The one thing that we have to be aware of is if there's going to be a quorum of the body, that we have to post it as a public meeting, but you can still go and have those presentations and discussions as well. But we'll work with you on doing that.
Okay. And is a quorum simple majority of the 11? So 6?
Yeah, 6, if there's only 6 or more.
Okay.
Sorry, excuse me, 5.
5 or more. Okay.
Negative quorum, I have to consider.
Negative quorum, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. What's the board's feeling or desires on that is, personally, I think community engagement is good. I think to Nick's point, we'd be representing it as our personal opinion and our personal experience serving on the redevelopment board versus a policy statement or something like that.
Yeah.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay.
And then if you collectively vote on a recommendation, then you can speak to that, as a board member.
Okay.
You can say the board member's recommendation is, and say, this is what we discussed, and this is why we voted, and this is what we think,
So currently, an example of that is, where we're at now is we can say, well, we approved the meeting minutes from the last meeting. We appointed chairs.
Yeah.
And we've gotten kind of outline of what our 7 goals are and kind of what the process for the RFP will be. To date, that's kind of all the information we have.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Does someone want to volunteer to be a spokesperson? Greg? Okay. Okay. And I'd be happy to, but I don't necessarily want to be the only person doing that. So I think
I'd be happy to assist, but I don't want to be the person that's leading the dance.
Yeah.
So in general, Craig, Nathan, or I would be happy to manage those or talk to those or direct them as needed.
And if there's others, we can help you get prepared for the meetings. We can give you speaking points. We can support you in any way that we need to. We can go along with you as is necessary as well. Yeah,
I don't believe there's a formal motion needed on that. That's just something policy that we're thinking of going forward. Okay. Anything else under old business? Okay. Item number 4, new business. Presentation and discussion on developing a request for proposals for redevelopment planning services. And I will throw this over to Kevin for the introduction of our speaker.
Yeah, so we have Bill here from AIRS. AIRS is our environmental consultant. Has been working on the site with us since before the acquisition. They did work prior to us acquiring the site as well. And their company has a long history in terms of responding to, creating, and being a part of the RFP process. And so I'm going to turn it over to Bill and let him walk through the presentation.
Thanks, Kevin. Bill Honey with AIRS Associates. As he mentioned, I am the on-call environmental consultant for this project. And since we last met, my firm, in coordination with city staff, pulled together a draft framework for an RFQ document for the advisory board to solicit a planning consultant for this project. So as you'll see tonight in the slides, I'm not going to go over every single piece of that framework, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the highlights of it. In your handouts, you should have the entire framework document as it's been laid out so far. You'll notice that it's not on city letterhead or anything like that because it is in draft form at this point. So, you know, after, if there's discussion or questions that you guys would like to have, I'd like to try to hold that to the end, and then at that point, I'd be ready to answer any questions. Next slide. Oh, excellent. So I'm not going to re-go through all of the project history and documentation that we kind of went through in the last meeting. But the reason these slides are in here is because I wanted to try to replicate what's in that RFQ framework for you in this slide form. But essentially, this is the information that we're going to give or proposing to give to the respondents in the RFQ document. So we want to give them just enough information that they understand the magnitude of the site and exactly what it is they're getting into and what the status of the project is to date. So in the framework document that you guys have, you'll notice that there's an insert that says CMAP. For efficiency, I've just put it on the slide here instead of inserting it into the draft. But this is the map that will be included or has been prepared so far to be included, and it includes all 7 parcels out in the dashed outline. It gives some information about the streets and roadways bordering it, some history, talks about TID 42, and some of the other challenges that have been facing, the site has faced so far. And then it goes into what the city's development goals are. So what are the overall project goals for the site? As I mentioned in the last presentation, we strongly recommend going after qualifications, not necessarily proposals for a set scope of work. So we felt that it would be better to include goals or objectives for the project rather than getting too detailed in specific scope items. So, you know, obviously the main goal here is to develop a conceptual redevelopment framework for the property. That's going to have to align with all the environmental cleanup goals. We're going to expect to see some idea of how this redevelopment would be phased, the approach for implementation, working on a site brand, so some form of branding that's recognizable, easy to put out there for the next part, which is public engagement. So the city, you know, really wants the public to be involved and have input on this project. And obviously the board would help facilitate that. But as you'll notice in the framework document, we've got quite a bit of focus on public engagement. And then of course, you can't have the plan without thinking about what infrastructure needs there are going to be to support it, and also looking at funding tools. So these consultants should be very aware of funding that's out there. They should understand infrastructure needs so that they're putting forth a design or a concept that's feasible. So what are the priorities and expectations that are outlined? Well, right now, the framework places an emphasis on qualifications and experience. So currently it's asking the respondents to provide 3 projects of a similar scale, complexity, involving environmental concerns, so essentially brownfield sites. It's going to ask for for references, dollar amount of the project, and then, of course, a status on how much of that plan has been implemented to date. So not only would the city be able to see examples from each one of these consultants, they would be able to follow up and ask questions from their previous clients about how successful the planning was, how responsive the consultant was, all of those key things that you want to consider as you're going to be working with somebody for the next possibly 18 months. So again, like I said, this is prioritizing public engagement. So as part of the response, in there right now, I'd ask for a public engagement plan. So in addition to the respondents providing an understanding of the project, we want them to outline what the exact public engagement plan is, whether that's meetings, flyers, websites, events. So they should clearly outline that. So then also, we want to know, from them, I think we have a minimum of 4 in there right now. Obviously, we can discuss that, but details on how they're going to incorporate at least 4 different events. So the outcome of what to expect from them. So at the end of it, hopefully they're going to provide you with all of these items, and it's going to have a balanced approach where they've got a project understanding of the environmental issues, the city's development goals, a great public engagement plan, and it's going to have a nice even balance within their proposal that they submit. So while we're not necessarily asking at this point for a cost, typically it's good to give a range of cost to these consultants that you expect the project to fall within. Otherwise, you'll get wildly different proposals. So somebody may misunderstand the magnitude of the project. So in order to prevent that, right now there's a proposed budgetary number in there so that they understand what to expect, or what the city is expecting, I should say, in terms of the amount of effort to be involved. So the very first task is going to be project initiation and data review. That's going to be key, especially with a project with as many moving parts as this one. There's going to be a significant amount of onboarding and learning that has to take place. So I want to ensure that they're aware of that. The site assessment and environmental integration. It's not site assessment in the fact that you're expecting them to continue with testing. It's more or less working with us as the environmental consultant to help them understand limitations that are known right now and how to integrate that into the plan. They would provide you with the market feasibility analysis, their redevelopment plan, which is the conceptual framework, the plan for stakeholder engagement, the implementation strategy, and then finally, at the end of it, they should also give a nice GIS document. So that's basically an electronic plan with all of those pieces incorporated into it. So right now, this is what the framework has outlined for requirements for community engagement. It's got, I believe, 4 events listed in there at the moment, but it could be more. So there's, the main goal is to be transparent throughout the process, focused on honest engagement, where you take actual feedback and then implement it into the plan. So this is what the submittals currently may look like. So if the schedule holds true, then you would receive submittals in December. Each one of them will be formatted this way, so we would require respondents to format in this particular way. So there's the 3 relevant examples. That's going to be kind of the key component there. And then hourly rate sheets, again, we're not asking them for a proposed price, but if you understand which key staff are involved in the project, which is required in the submittal, then you can take a look at that hourly rate sheet and kind of get an idea of how much, how many hours of that person's time that they would be committing to the project. So once you receive these submittals in, obviously there's got to be a way to grade them that keeps it fair and balanced. So this would be provided to the consultants as well so that they understood what the grading criteria would be. But as you can tell, it's heavily focused on relevant project experience. 20% is going to be personal or team qualifications, followed by the technical approach and understanding. And of course, 10% for the engagement plan, scheduling, and then 5% for responsiveness. Obviously, these could be adjusted. So this is the tentative schedule for releasing the RFQ document and then accepting responses. So right now, the anticipated release date would be early November, November 5th. So then we would receive questions in by the end of November, respond early December, submittals, final submittals would be due early December as well. And then following that, board and the city would work on scoring those submittals. And then the top 3 firms would be selected for interviews. And then because of the holidays, right now the plan is that interviews would happen in January. And then obviously the board would recommend the selection of one of those 3 consultants with the project kicking off in February. And I know that it says final plan completion in late 2026, but if it is an 18-month timeframe, obviously that would be extended beyond that. So make sure that all of these respondents receive the same information. Obviously, there will be things that are included in the RFP document itself, but it will include links to DNR's website where there's publicly available information about the contamination. It'll include links to the city's website where they can find information about zoning and infrastructure. And then on top of that, there's been a SharePoint site that's been set up to provide them with maps, drawings, background information, environmental documents that would be more condensed than them sifting through thousands of pages of DNR files, so that you're not making it overly difficult for them to find useful information. All of the submissions would come in to the assistant to the city manager, Nick Faust. Right now, it doesn't require a paper submission. As it's written now, it would just require an electronic submission, although there's no reason they couldn't submit a paper copy as well. But electronic generally makes it easier for sharing, especially with the board. And just is generally more efficient for passing information through. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Bill. Does the board have any questions of Bill? Okay, Greg?
Bill, thank you. Throughout the document, it's sprinkled in there about actionable, implementable roadmap. Is there a way to gauge that based on the submission? Do we get a look at previous work they've done on projects? You know, because it's really important to the end of this.
Right, so as part of the 3, so we're requiring right now that it's got in there, they got to give 3 references in addition to the references for the 3 projects that they would present as their past experience or qualifications.
And you would get the documents that they submitted to whoever?
Right, well, they may not give the entire plans, but what they typically you receive is a project overview. So they'll provide a highlight, information about what was performed, that scope of work. They may provide drawings, but it'll have costs associated with it. And then key would be references accompanying those so that the city and the board could check to make sure that it wasn't just a plan, that it was a useful plan, and check the status of that plan's implementation.
Okay. One more question. Under 7, submission requirements, number 4, it talks about with a minimum of 1 having developed projects executed. Is that saying they've only had 1 project that they've completed? Or am I reading
No,
that wrong?
we just want one of them to have an example where it's been completed, full implementation. So of the examples that they provide to demonstrate their qualifications, at least one of those we would like to see as being completely implemented.
Perfect, thank you. That's all I have.
I have a question on that. So who can we expect on both in-process and completed plans that are being presented by consultants as reference? Like, who would we expect as a reference? Would we expect a city manager? Would we expect a city planner? What role would we expect?
Yes, so typically for projects of this size, it's pretty much going to be municipalities. So yes, I would say city managers, mayors, economic development directors, public works directors, those types of staff, planning staff, if the city is large enough to have planning staff, those would be the key references that we would be looking for. It certainly wouldn't, it would need to be the client who hired them to do the work and whoever that representative was.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jim C?
Bill, at this size and scale, what do you think for an opportunity for responses? 250 acres is a big parcel.
I think this will generate a lot of interest. I think that you'll have a select few consultants that can actually demonstrate redevelopment on this scale with brownfields involved. Just given the complexity here, you're probably going to see mostly large name firms, national firms. It's probably going to, you may have submissions from out-of-state respondents. I would expect that.
The requirement for 3 similar projects limit the pool significantly?
That's really going to cut it down. So, because it's not just, you may have a smaller firm that had 1 large project, but to have 3 large projects, that firm does this regularly.
Okay.
And then to show that one of those has been implemented, that's going to even narrow it down more.
Okay.
Maybe one more question, and I'm not sure if this is appropriate for you, or if it's more a question appropriate for the city. But beyond what the consultants would provide to us in terms of examples of their work, is it reasonable to ask, whether it's, again, the city or AIRS, for some case studies of what is possible as we're looking for a consultant to fulfill a vision that doesn't exist yet? Is it possible for us to see some examples of successful brownfield developments that are maybe not associated with these consultants?
Kevin, I'll ask that to you.
Like not associated with the consultants that we're considering?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, we could provide those. There are plenty of examples out there that we could draw from to give. I mean, I think through the process, we'll be exposed to that anyway, because we'll be trying to draw from ideas of other successes in other places. But we can certainly provide the committee with examples of successful brownfield redevelopments that have been done really well. And then sometimes that reveals really high quality consultants that were involved as well. So
I would appreciate that. I'm not sure if, no.
Okay.
yeah, we can definitely do that as part of the process.
Kind of an administration question for either Kevin or Nick. If the deadline for issue is 11/5, 6 days out, as far as any comments or questions from the board, would you prefer that resolved tonight, or is there going to be a last minute email going to Nick to make his life miserable on the 4th.
I would probably do that anyway.
I think I'm making Nick's life miserable right now. No, I mean, you can give us some feedback tonight. If you have emails that you want us to incorporate into the RFP, you can email us and we can take a look at it and let folks know what was emailed, let you all know what was emailed to us, and then what modifications we've made to the RFP as a result. That date that we have in there is not a hard and fast date. We can push that out. It's totally our discretion. It's just, we want some level of deadline so we don't,
Okay.
let this drag on forever. So,
Right, we were trying to take in the dates for holidays, right?
yeah, one of the drivers of this is just so that we have the ability to evaluate proposals and do interviews prior to holiday season, because once you get into holiday season, trying to get that coordinated gets really tough.
Question for Bill. In terms of what's in the RFP right now, and you being the brownfield consultant for the city, are you satisfied that it's well enough defined, that your role will be well enough defined, and you'll get the information you need in looking at possible consultants?
We're asking right now that they define their project approach, and that approach should include how they plan to integrate the environmental assessments and environmental cleanup, expected environmental cleanup issues into the plan. If there's holes in that plan or gaps, obviously that kind of weighs into the grading, right? They should understand the environmental issues if they're able to demonstrate the experience. But if there's specific things that jump out during the grading process, that's when the interviews give an opportunity to look at that. It's, usually you don't reach out to them after submission unless you're inviting them for an interview.
Okay. During the kind of project approach or scope behind that, do you see the consultant, investigating and kind of looking at linkages and other corridors in adjacent contexts to help develop their plan? So this isn't just a design in a bubble or design in a vacuum?
Absolutely. They should be looking at the surrounding neighborhoods, what street projects that may be going on. There should be a vision looking into the future, not just currently. And I would expect that they match the character with the goals.
Okay. Under market and feasibility analysis, specifically housing, will they dive into kind of units needed, price points needed, quantity needed, something, so tangible, not just you need more housing?
Right. There should be some, it would be market information that's available. They likely wouldn't go out and get their own market information, but it would be relatively specific to Janesville, this area, or sometimes if there's certain pieces that aren't available, it might be like central Wisconsin, and they should be able to provide relatively specific market information, not just generalizations.
Okay. Question on the public and stakeholder engagement under task 5, and this may be more of a conversation for the board. It's listing a minimum of 4, and that's across, as scheduled right now, about a 10-month time frame. I thought key points would be kind of, at least after task 3, kind of the market and feasibility analysis, kind of telling the community what they think they found or what they did find. And then at least after conceptual framework, redevelopment, to kind of get that first kick at what they're thinking. And then probably again after final presentation, something like that, to say, this is what we think, this is what potentials are, here's what we think is the final. I'm just wondering if 4 is enough. Does the board have any?
I had that same question.
Okay.
Along the same lines, is a 10% weighting in the final assessment sufficient if we're calling engagement as a really important piece of this proposal?
I looked at that also, and I was wondering if we could pull %5 from project management and schedule. If it's as large a firm as we think we're going to get, they should be very well adapted at that.
Yes, I agree. If whatever you would like to weight more, I mean, that's at your discretion to decide how to grade. The goal here was just to get a framework out so that you guys could make these types of
Sure.
adjustments. Yeah.
I was thinking, maybe 5 to 6, and I guess I don't know how you count an engagement for them. If they do 2 in one day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, is that 2 or is that 1?
That would be something that we could
Negotiate?
or specify in the RFQ document, please, or in the plan. Ask them to specify that as part of their plan. How are you counting the engagement sessions?
Okay.
I'd like to request inclusion, of course, preferably more than 4 is my preference, but also making sure that those 4 are in places around the city that make it accessible to all populations.
And I think that can be negotiated when those meeting times, whether it's, Wilson Elementary or Jackson or the library or something like that.
Varied times, varied locations, yeah.
And that's part of the beauty of doing an RFQ process versus an RFP process, is that it gives you some greater flexibility because we're giving them a range of potential costs with hourly rates instead of locking them into, you're going to do X number of sessions this many times. Because they may respond with a public engagement plan that's very, very creative. So I think it's best to give them some flexibility, but just define a minimum number that you expect to see.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Jim
Bill?
C?
Yeah, Bill, on the end of it, I think one thing to kind of note, and I'm hoping everyone has seen too, is the ability for all of them to have access to the same information. And part of that is going to be all of the information from the DNR, the BERTS numbers. So when there were questions about the brownfield experience and knowledge and addressing those, hopefully they would realize that there's extensive information that research they'll have to do initially to respond as well.
That's a good interview question. Watch their faces.
Yeah, right.
Actually, on that topic, I did have a question about access to the data room. So, of course, the consultants will be building their plan based on the information that they're given. But will we have access to the same data to ensure that whatever they're referencing is complete?
So generally, it is on the consultant responding to the RFQ to do their own due diligence. You provide them with as much information as you can, but that should be part of their process is doing that due diligence. Everybody should receive the same information so that it's fair and that there's no preferential treatment or discrepancy in the source. So the data room right now is controlled so that it would only include documents that the city wanted the consultants to have. So the access to it is essentially restricted. So those that receive the RFQ document would have a link where they could see it, but only the city would be able to put things onto that site.
That's clear, but
Yeah, I think what Aaron was saying was, would the board members have access to that SharePoint site?
Access as in
Just
being able to view it.
review the documents that are on hand.
Just
Yeah,
to
I
make
think
sure that
we
we
could arrange-
understand what they're talking about.
Yes. Actually, you can't see it in the skeleton document because it's a printout, but at the end of it, there is a link that was embedded in there. So
Oh, okay,
it would be
JATCO
available via the
redevelopment
link to
project. Okay.
view.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, other questions? Okay, this is probably one for administration, and we'll just vet this right off the bat, Kevin. Will the responses to the RFP be public documents?
The responses,
Yeah, from the consultants.
yeah, we'll make that clear
Okay.
in the RFQ process. So
Okay.
they will be public documents.
Trying to save you a headache for
Yes.
later.
I get it, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, other questions? So, next steps would be,
no,
Nick?
actually, I'm sorry, I do
Go
have
ahead.
another question.
Go ahead.
This might be
No,
a
go
little
ahead.
bit of an elephant in the room.
Okay.
We know that there are responses to the RFP You know, it was obviously, it's been discussed at length.
Yep.
And is the expectation that the consultants will have awareness, or are they building a plan exclusive of the proposals that were given in response to the latest RFP?
The consultants will have awareness of the proposal if it moves forward. And so what would happen would be is that they would have, if the city council determines to move forward, then they would have to incorporate a plan that could possibly include a data center, and they would have to develop an alternative plan to that as well. So, because there are 1,000 things that could happen between now and then, so they'd have to develop different alternatives. And in fact, in the RFQ right now, we've indicated multiple alternatives of development to be presented to this board and to the city council.
Do we expect that this budget of 200 to 225 or 225 to 250 would include contingency planning like that?
Yeah, I mean, because we're already asking them to produce multiple plans. So one thing I heard is that it sounded like there was a preference, at least for some of you, to increase the public engagement scoring.
Yes.
Is that a consensus of the board before we
Yeah,
make any modifications?
I think that would be,
Add 5% to it and take 5% away from schedule and project management.
Yeah. And if there's other stuff that comes up in regards to the proposals that you want to email us, then we can make those changes and send them back out to the board to let them know that we've gotten that input.
Mhm.
And before we finalize anything, make sure that folks are okay with those modifications.
Do we want to shoot for kind of 6 engagement meetings?
Yeah, we
And
put a
then
minimum in there. I think we put a minimum. We can increase the minimum.
It's like building codes, you know?
Yeah.
It's a minimum acceptable standard, and why do I have to do more?
Well, the thing to keep in mind is that typically in these proposals, one of the most expensive things is meetings.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. It might impact our budget.
Okay.
So,
We can always negotiate that.
I think it depends on the
At the
size
interview.
too, right? If you've got a 2-hour meeting opposed to 3 or 4, or how you're doing it.
yeah, the way the cost comes in is that it's also, travel costs for consultants if they're a national consultant.
Oh, sure.
And then the number of meetings, and then depending upon how it's built out, sometimes they give you like a lump sum, like we're gonna do 6, 7, 8 meetings for this amount. Sometimes they charge you an hourly rate per consultant based upon who's there. With the highest level people getting charged the most, as you might expect, and maybe some more support people being charged less. But I just know that from experience and handling these before, the number of meetings increase tends to drive up the cost.
Sure.
Just something to be aware of as
Yeah.
as we evaluate the proposals.
Jim C.
Would it be acceptable if we put something in there that stated that there's flexibility, or we're looking for them to suggest, even if they did 2 presentations in one day, that it's by the day, not by the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, that's all negotiable in the scope of work when we get there. Yeah.
Any,
But is there language that maybe makes that more clear in this?
We can certainly add that
Yeah.
in, that prefer to have public engagement proposed by the day instead of by the event,
Okay.
or make them define what an event is.
Yeah, because.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that, to define what an event is.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the most creative of these companies, or the engagement's not just a meeting, right? There's other opportunities, there's pop-up events, there's surveys, there's all sorts of things that you can do to encourage engagement that we would just have to work through a scope of work and see what the proposals are.
As
Yeah.
we're working.
go ahead. No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
As we're working, just as long as we're on the topic of engagement, you mentioned maybe engagement throughout the process, which I think is really important. Should we be explicit in the RFQ that we're asking for engagement throughout the different phases of the process? Or is that assumed?
You got to come into the mic, Bill, sorry.
For most of the firms responding, I would say that that's probably an assumed reality. We are asking for a schedule too. So maybe it would be a nice change to add that they include the public engagement plan into the proposed schedule so that you guys can see when they plan to perform these engagement activities. I mean, they may have some, like Kevin mentioned, where it's the pop-up events, sure, that's like a specific day, but then there may be surveys that are open to the public the entirety of the time, taking feedback, or for sections of like several weeks at a time. So maybe make sure they include those into the proposed schedule.
This may be more a question for the board. With, the potential of this being a national firm and potentially not near Wisconsin, what is kind of virtual meetings versus in-person meetings? I don't think community engagement would work virtually.
No, I think you have to be in person.
I mean, all the design meetings, all meetings should be in person and virtual. I don't know what experience with that.
Yeah,
At a staff level, we would certainly have virtual meetings to work through plans, discussions, preparation for board meetings and stuff like that. But I think that our expectation would be that the vast majority of the principals would be in person when we're engaging with the board or doing community engagement or anything like that. So, but it's pretty typical nowadays to do virtual meetings, like working meetings while you're looking at a plan or whatever.
Okay. Other wishes or thoughts of the board?
I have a question. I'm just wondering, with the complexity of the project and the RFP is being issued and then submitted, it's about 4 weeks. And I know we said we're flexible on that deadline, but is 4 weeks based on the complexity of the project too few weeks?
I mean, Bill, you got to answer that. You're the consultant. You're the one who responds to these things.
So most of the qualified consultants that would respond to something like this are going to have, I wouldn't say canned or boilerplate information, but they're gonna have experience pulling these together. 4 weeks is not unusual. I would say anywhere from 4 to, I guess, 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks is really stretching it out. For the most part, it's between 4 and 6 weeks that I have, in my experience, that I've seen.
So we've given you some direction on some changes. Is it fair to say that any additional comments from the board should be emailed to Nick by Monday? I believe that is the 3rd of November.
Yeah, that's the 3rd.
I can't believe it's November next week.
Yeah,
It's November next week,
3rd.
by the way, for everybody's information.
Yeah.
And then Nick will have a couple days to incorporate those prior to issue.
Yeah, end of day, November 3rd.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Yep.
Just to clarify the process, we'll have our questions or comments in by end of day November 3rd. At what point will the board get to see the final draft before it's actually issued?
Right at, like a few days after, we'll have Nick work on it and send it out.
Okay.
If there are any final comments after that, we can incorporate them.
In addenda?
Yeah.
Okay. Any
Does that
bites?
mean we're changing the schedule then?
No, it goes out the
But still go out the
5th, but then there's questions due back from the consultants by, is it the second week of December? Or right before, and then they're due, I think, a week after that, or a few days after that, so. So
And
if we had questions, we could also probably incorporate it in that addenda.
Yeah, and if there are, like, if folks want to see changes after we send out the final draft, we can move it a day or two without any issue.
Okay.
So.
I had one other thing that I was thinking. Any bites from firms nosing around asking about this project?
Oh, I've had some.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's interest
I don't know
out
if
there.
Bill has, yeah, but yeah, yes. And,
Okay.
and my deputy's at a national conference right now where he's nosing around where a lot of these folks hang out, so.
Okay. Anything else under item 4A? Okay. That's new business. Adjournment is next on the agenda. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Craig, and a second? Aaron? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're out. Thank you
Thank
much
you.
for everyone, and thank you for attending tonight.